Hey everyone, how's it going? Azren the Language Nerd here. I'm the owner of the Calgary Language Nerds. My team and I, we teach a wide variety of foreign languages to people of all ages and all levels of fluency. If you'd like to work with us, I would appreciate that. I would love it. I'd love to work with you and help you learn whatever language you are trying to learn. And so please visit azrenthelanguagenerd.com/classes and you can see some of the services that we offer. We're really good at what we do and we work tirelessly. We work very hard to work with language learners to achieve whatever language learning goals and fluency goals that they have. Now, this part of the course here is a little bit unique. I think it's the only part of the course, if I'm not mistaken, that technically finds itself in two levels. There's two places where you're going to find this video. The first place is in the introduction section, in the start here section of the course, and it's optional for these people. You don't have to actually watch it. In fact, many of you, I'd probably recommend you to skip it because it's going to come up again later on in level 4. And that brings me to the second group of people who are watching this, which is people at level 4, because this becomes much more relevant for people at level 4. If you are a beginner, or even if you're not a beginner, even if you're an intermediate, or if you're basically lower than level 4, and you're watching this video as a part of the introduction series, there's a very good likelihood you don't need to watch this right away unless you are an experienced language learner. I think that's probably a good criteria. In other words, you've learned other languages before, you're more experienced with it, and B, you're someone that really likes grammar. And you're like, yeah, I like to dig into it. I really want to learn this. I really want to dig deep and understand it at a deep level right away. I want to kind of dive into that. Well, if you want to, then you're more than welcome to. But I would say that the average language learner, if you're below level 4, I probably recommend you don't watch this video quite yet. It's just going to be overwhelming and you're going to want to run away from the language. Yeah, so I'd recommend for most language learners, probably if you're below level 4, this is not a video to watch now. It's not really relevant. You're not going to need any of this information for a long, long time. And of course, the exceptions would be people who are really into grammar and are grammar nuts and they love that kind of stuff, in which case, keep watching. If you're at level 4, you should probably watch this, though. You need to know this, and it's going to help you tremendously. So what I've done is I've gone and I've compiled common grammar points that are found in many different languages. I don't know if this is a fully comprehensive list, but it's as close as I've been able to find. I was doing some Googling to see if other people have done this already, so I can just link it out and say, hey, look at this. I couldn't find much, so I've done my best to make it myself. So what we're about to cover off are grammar points you find in many languages, and many of these points may not exist in the language you are learning, and many of them may exist in the language that you are learning. If it does not exist, disregard the grammar point altogether. If it does exist, probably pay attention. Okay, and it's worth paying attention. Vamos, chicos. Vamos, that's Spanish. So grammar point number 1 is what is called gender, grammatical gender to be specific. So gender is a way to classify nouns. Let's go nice and slowly here because we're going to use some linguistic and languagey terminology. It is a way to classify nouns. English does not have genders, okay? But French does, Spanish does, Hindi does, Gujarati does. Lots of languages have gender. So basically, in very basic terms, what a strange sentence. In very basic terms, gender means that every object, as strange as it sounds, is either a boy or a girl. In some cases, it's a boy, it's a girl, or it's neither. That's what gender means. Now, when I was doing my research for this, there seem to be languages that even have other types of genders that are not necessarily based on masculine, feminine, or neither, like a neuter gender, as I've written right here. But let's not get too far into that. That's going to kind of come up in a moment anyway. So most of the time, in my experience, you're going to see things like masculine, feminine, and possibly a neuter as well. But there might be other genders as well. So keep that in mind. Keep that in the back of your mind. So the gender of the noun affects various other parts of the sentence. So I've just given a simple Spanish example that I showed in level 1 anyway. Un teléfono rojo means a red phone. Una manzana roja means a red apple. So in English, we have the word red. We just have red. But Spanish is rojo and roja. Why? Well, because manzana is a feminine. Teléfono is masculine. So because of that, not only, if you'll notice here, we have un versus here una, not only does the un and una change, but the adjective changes too. It's not just one word for red. There's actually two words for red. And actually in Spanish, there's not two words for red. There's actually more than two words for red. And that goes for every adjective. There are different forms of every verb, every word. And it affects lots of different elements of the sentence. It's not just adjectives, by the way. It goes a little deeper than that. Even what do you call those? Demonstratives, is that right? Like these apples would be estas manzanas, but these phones, estos teléfonos. So estas versus estos. So it affects lots of elements of the language if the language you're learning has genders. So what that means is if your language, first of all, if you're like, I don't know if my language has genders, that probably means you're very, very beginner. And again, for the average language learner, don't worry too much about this. If you follow my program, you will end up learning about genders. It will come up. You will acquire it. You will become more comfortable with it. All of this will happen. So don't get too overwhelmed now because you'll be able to do this. It might look hard, but you can do it. And it'll happen quite naturally with my program. But if you are more intermediate advanced, you're like, oh, I'm not really sure about genders. Well, probably worth Googling it, looking into it. And maybe you've got to do some more work on your genders. Maybe there's some more work to be done. So you need to look yourself in the mirror and figure out, how am I on genders? How am I doing with these? The good news is, generally with genders, when you mix them up, people still understand what you said. So it's not really a huge deal if you mix up the gender. It's kind of a low priority mistake to make, or a low impact mistake to make. Probably, actually, before we go too much further, I do want to go up here. This is important to mention. There's a process here on how to learn grammar effectively. We've already talked about this in the introduction, but if you need to review it, go watch like the previous video in the introduction, part 3, and you can watch this again, or just pause this video and read these again. And then you can always ask me if you have any questions. There's like a contact button on this website you're on. You can contact me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So, okay. So this is how you learn grammar. So if we're going through these grammar points, like, how do I learn that? How do I practice that? These are your 6 steps, well, 7 steps to follow. Okay, so gender. Now we can go a step further. We also have grammatical number. What the heck is number? Well, number means that nouns, and I think it just applies to nouns. Actually, no, it doesn't just apply to nouns. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, dos manzanas rojas. Like, oh yeah, it's not just nouns. Actually, wait a second. Well, let's just stick with nouns for now, but they're often spelled different and pronounced differently if they are singular as opposed to plural. Singular means one, plural means more than one. And again, it's not just the noun, actually, as I'm like looking at this now, as I'm looking at this. I mean, sure, it is the noun, but it often extends more than just the noun. So if we look at this, again, another Spanish example, dos means two, dos teléfonos rojos, dos manzanas rojas. So you'll notice rojos, rojas, if we go up here, rojo, roja. All of those mean one thing in English, which is red. If you're new to the language, you might be like, whoa, what the heck? This is so complicated. Yes, but I promise you, it's only really complicated if you try to learn it purely intellectually. I promise you. So do not get discouraged. Do not get overwhelmed. You can do it as long as you don't try to learn this as a purely intellectual exercise. You must follow this process up here, where you start by exposing yourself organically, which will happen through this course, right? There's a process to follow, and you can do it. And if you're struggling, just message me, contact me. I can help you with this. You can do it. Grammar does not need to be nearly as complex as people make it out to be. It's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's very possible for the vast majority of people. So we have our number. In English, we have numbers too. 1 cat, 2 cats. We add an S at the end of English to make it plural. But Mandarin, for example, doesn't really have a lot of plurals, for instance. Kind of does, but not really. Okay, noun classes. Oh, these are funny. These are interesting. I don't actually speak any languages that have noun classes. In a way, Mandarin sort of does, but not to the extent of like these kinds of noun classes, which we're going to talk about. So we've talked about gender. Gender is one way to classify nouns. You have some that fit into the feminine category, some that fit into the masculine category. Maybe if it's a language like German, there's a neuter category, and you can split these nouns up, and everything fits into one of three categories. Well, certain languages have noun classes. And what they do is they don't do masculine, feminine, neuter, or masculine, feminine. They just have a completely different organizational system. And just like with genders, sometimes there's not exactly a logical connection as to why this noun belongs to class 1 versus class 5. Oh, that's the other thing. A lot of these languages that have noun classes, it's not like 2 or 3 noun classes. They're like 5, 6, 8, 10, 15, 18. I think Bantu, I'm not an expert on this because I don't speak any Bantu languages. I know that Luganda, I know someone who speaks it, and I conferred with him before I made this. I wanted to just double check I had this right. And I also read some blogs on it. I read some grammar websites on it. So I really want to make sure I have this right. So I'm like 99.9% sure I got this right. But Bantu languages in that, like Luganda, for instance, has 10 noun classes. 10. So that would be like having masculine. It's kind of like saying if you are used to, a lot of people are used to gendered languages. They understand what that means. Imagine if there weren't 2 genders, masculine, feminine. Imagine there were 10 or 15 or more. So that's what these noun classes are. And that makes it challenging because, well, if you then have to learn, okay, these nouns belong in this noun belongs in this class. And because it's in this class, it now affects the adjectives in the sentence. It affects lots of other parts of the sentence. The same way that gender and number affects even adjectives. Rojos is red. Rojas is also red. That kind of thing also happens with noun classes. And so that's worth noting. And I'm going to stress it again. Don't get overwhelmed. I can feel some of you being like, whoa, noun, oh my God, 20? I have to memorize 20 for every word. And how, yeah, you do, but it's not as hard as you think. I promise you, you can actually do it. I know you can do it. I would bet like everything in my soul that you can do it. I bet my soul, like you can do it. You just have to follow, like you just have to go about it the right way. And I'm more than happy to hop on Zoom calls or whatever needs to happen to help you do it. Yeah, to help you do it. So you can do it. Absolutely, you can do it. Okay. Now we have cases. What's my battery's getting low here. I'm on 18% battery. Hopefully that's enough to finish this video. We'll see what happens. Now, cases exist in many languages too. Cases are a bit hard to explain. And I'm going to be 100% honest, even this definition that I've written, I don't know if this is the best definition, just real openness with you. But the definition is really not the most important thing. It's just another type of categorization, essentially. Just like we have like these noun classes, we have genders. It's another form of categorization. And if you're used to languages that have tenses, like if you're watching this, hopefully you've got a little bit of a base in your language and you know what a tense means. We're going to get to tenses in a moment, actually, right here. But think of it like tenses. Like tenses affect your verb, right? So when you have that tense, it affects how you conjugate the verb, how you spell the verb, how you pronounce the verb. Well, case is another type of spelling change and pronunciation change of words that you have to know. So, for instance, in German, there's 4 cases. We have nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. So nominative, for example, is used in sentences that do not have an object. So I am eating. What that means is I didn't specify what I'm eating. There's no object that I'm eating. There's no food that I'm eating. There's no object in that sentence. There's nothing that I'm eating. You just don't know. You just know I'm eating. But the moment you say I'm eating a chocolate bar, right? Now there's what we call a direct object. It is a thing that I'm eating. We know what I'm eating now. Now what happens is that this word a becomes a different word. There's not only one form of a. There's actually many forms of a. Now, chocolate bar is feminine in German. So from what I've been told and from what I understand, this particular sentence, you would not see anything accusative in the sentence. So if you speak German, you might know what I'm talking about. But it still is in the accusative. And it will impact the language and how you not conjugate, but how you it will affect the spelling and pronunciation of many words in the sentence, right? German has a dative, which is used in sentences that have an indirect object. So I'm sending a chocolate bar to Logan. Logan's my German tutor, by the way, at this point in time. To Logan. So because you're sending something to someone, anytime you do something to someone or for someone, now we have to use the dative case. And then we have genitive, right? Which is one way to talk about possession in German. So I'm eating one of Logan's, right? It belongs to Logan, chocolate bars. I'm eating one of his chocolate bars. So cases exist. And now some languages have more than 4 cases, right? And Gujarati is funny. So let's go on a slight tangent. Despite my low battery power on the computer, I'm now down to 16%. Gujarati, I can't figure out what the case situation is in Gujarati. From what I read somewhere that it had cases, but I don't quite understand. Yeah, anyway, that's just another thing I'm thinking about. It's not important for now, but okay, let's scroll down here. So these are cases. As a reminder, I see so many blog posts and videos of people going, of people saying, "Oh my God, cases are so hard." You know, "Oh my God, this language has cases. Oh, it's so hard. Oh my God, it's hurting my brain." No, it doesn't quite have to. It doesn't quite have to. It might take you longer to be able to say things and properly communicate, but it shouldn't feel that much harder per se. It's like character. Well, I don't like writing. That's a bit different. Well, actually, it isn't, to be honest. Now that I'm really thinking about it, it's like characters in Mandarin. You know, most languages, you learn the alphabet, you learn the phonetic system, and off you go. You can start to read stuff. Mandarin, for years and years and years, you have to learn characters. There's so many characters you have to memorize. It just takes longer to memorize the characters, but it's not necessarily, in the initial phase, it's quite challenging because you're not used to like looking at characters that way. You're not used to it. So initially it's hard, but over time, it's actually not harder. It's actually not that hard. It just takes longer to be able to read, but it's not any more difficult than you learning to read in Spanish. It's not any more, well, initially, yes, it is difficult. I will admit, initially you're like, whoa, but after a point, it's not any more difficult than being able to read. Spanish is a bad example because it's the same alphabet. So let's say like Gujarati or Hindi. You're not used to like Hindi and it's a different script. It's not any more difficult to learn another script than it is to learn the Mandarin characters. But Mandarin characters is more time consuming. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So cases, you can do it. The difficulty will be like, you know, let's say hard, but not crazy hard, right? Hard, but doable. It'll just take you a longer time when there's cases. Versus if there's no cases, well, you won't have to worry about them, so it's going to save you time. And you won't have to worry about that. Hopefully I'm making sense. I'm just really trying to stress that grammar is not something that needs to be something that's, oh my God, so challenging. No, don't let it scare you. It's just, it's a shadow monster. It's not real. It's like those boggarts, right? What do you call those mythical creatures? It's like takes on the form of something you fear, but it's not real or something like that. It's basically like that. Okay, many languages have tenses and moods. So a tense refers to when an action takes place. So I give some English examples. I walked the dog is a simple present tense. I walked the dog, simple past tense. I will walk the dog is a simple future tense. We have many tenses in English, and there's many tenses in many languages. Okay. Now, mood is a weird one. Refers to the tone or feeling implied when communicating. Now, this one's an odd one. I'm going to focus just on one of them for the time being, which is a subjunctive mood. Exists in French and Spanish. It is so difficult for a native English or French speaker to native English speaker to grasp. Really difficult because we don't quite have the concept in the same way as French or Spanish, for instance. But again, when you go to learn these things, right? When you go to learn these things, it's just about following that process of how to learn grammar, which is just up here, right? Or in video number 3, just one video before the introduction. Like, there's a way you can do it. And if you're struggling, just reach out. I will help you. You can do it. I know you can. I know you can. And of course, there's others. Now, the others, I can't make a fully comprehensive list. I don't know if anyone on this planet ultimately could. I don't know how doable that would be. Like, that's really hard. But I've put a list here, like particles in Japanese are really hard for people. Phrasal verbs in English are hard for people. Ba constructions in Mandarin. Gujarati has a weird thing with transitive and intransitive verbs in the past tense, which gets really wonky. It's so odd, right? Lots of languages have different levels of formality, which throws a loop in things. Lots of languages have what are called irregular verbs that don't follow any kind of pattern. Word order, regional differences there's often different ways to do things and say things and conjugate things in different regions. Tones is not grammar oriented, but a lot of languages have them, and that's like, it's not grammar, but I suppose I put tones and chengyu over here, right? Like chengyu, I put these last two here. They're not really grammar, but I suppose I put them there because languages have individual languages will sometimes have individual aspects which are hard for that individual language, and it may not be grammatical, but it may be something that's really hard for you to wrap your head around. But ultimately, you can do it. It's okay. Work your way slowly. I promise you can do it. I promise you can do it. I've worked with enough language learners to know you can do it. I know you can. Okay. Absolutely you can. 100% confidence in you. If you're doubting me, it's like, oh, Azren doesn't know me. Well, book time with me. There's a thing on this page, azrenthelanguagenerd.com/free course. There's something called the starter kit, or email me, reach out. I'll connect with you and talk with you and like get to know you. And then I can tell you if I believe within my heart of hearts, if you can do it. Let me get to know you first and I'll tell you. So obviously there are other, let's go down here. There are other grammatical points. I don't think I've gotten them all, but I've gotten the major ones. So from here, where do you go? Well, if you're at that level 4 stage, it's time for you to kind of it's time for you to take a step back and realize, okay, like, where am I at when it comes to these grammar points? Like, what do I know? What do I kind of know but needs more practice? And what do I completely don't know? It's time for you to take stock of that. And it's going to be time for you to gradually and slowly, gradually, but consistently start to work your way through those grammar gaps that you have and fill those gaps in. If you're more a beginner, then don't worry. Just follow the program for now, and you'll worry about filling the gaps at a level 4. Get 1, 2, and 3 is going to cover your major grammatical points. You'll bump into them, you'll learn them. And level 4, you can start to really kind of use this knowledge. But level 4 people, it's time to start filling in your gaps because you're trying to get to that professional level, right? So you need to be a bit more picky with yourself a little bit. All right. So level 4 people, next time we're going to talk about the following: tourism. We're going to talk about some tourism and public transportation related things. That'll jump into next week. For people that are in just going to level 1, level 2, level 3 after this, well, you'll get to this point later. You'll kind of get to this topic, and yeah, I'm at 12% battery, so I think I made good time. Okay, I'm a bit sleepy now. It's kind of late at night here. I make these videos at night usually because I'm more of a night owl. So time for me to go to sleep. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it as always. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.